In the Yechana Show, we mentioned that we're focusing on water meters as an example of an electronic implement which takes into account many of the inyanim that we have been learning and will continue learning for the next week or so on Shabbos. Water meters used to be mechanical in that you turned on your water and a little wheel turned and it was registered, like the old style slot machines. Slot turned and it went from 1, 1, 2 to 3. You can still see your gas meter working that way, even though gas meters are now becoming electronic too. Where I live in the wastelands of Manhattan, Con Edison has still not changed the meters in many places, and they're still old mechanical meters. They're changing them now. But in the water meters, in the last 10 years, they started going electronic. There's a picture here of a water meter. If you want to give us the page before, I believe it is, Dr. Letterreich. I think it's the page before. I'll give you a picture of what a water meter looks like. Again, this is all for extra credit. You don't really need to see it. There we go. Okay, digital water meter. So that's a electronic water flow meter. Those are 4 examples of what they look like. And you can see that there's a digital readout, which is important halachically. And the way it works is the following. You open up your water, the water flows out. When you open up the water flows out, an impulse is sent electronically to a disk in that gizmo that you see there. And from there, after it records, this is the way the G3 water meter, which was first introduced in Eretz Yisrael 10 years ago, 15 years ago, by now I guess, was constructed, that after a certain amount of water, 100 liters, was accumulated, then the circuit was closed by the sending of this information to the main office, and that's where the electronic circuit was closed. The first step was only in recording on a disk, which may or may not close any circuits, and from there it was certainly sent circuit-wise to a recording on a disk. Okay, so how did I get to this story, and why am I giving this year, since there are so many more qualified people than me? The answer is because I had a box ticket view of this polmus in the following way. 7 years ago or 8 years ago, an article appeared in the press. There were several articles in the press. I copied one of them here. Not really the one I want to talk about here, but just to give you an example of what was going on. You can see the headline. I don't know, is there any way to move this in one shot so you can see the whole page there? Because the bandwidth is not allowing this very fast. An article appeared in the Haredi press, which talks about, the water meter article, which talked about water meters in Shabbos. And there it says, wow, what a wonderful place Lakewood is, because in Lakewood we were able to be Manea, Echshash, Isser, Chil Shabbos, because, to make a long story short, there are 2 water meter companies in Lakewood. Lakewood is divided geographically between a newer water company and an older water company. In that article, they give you the names of the company. Can't get the article up for some reason. I can't go back. Okay, interesting. Interesting. So in that article, fine. So take our word for it. There's an article there from the Haredi Press, which says that what a great place Lakewood is, because we're able to work with the water company and install water meters which prevent Chil Shabbos. Interesting. Chil Shabbos is a strong terminology. Now the problem is that back then when that was written, I'm not sure what the Metzias is now. Still, the overwhelming majority of water meters in Lakewood were the old style water meters. So I'll daiti that this is Chil Shabbos. In another article, in a parallel article in the Haredi Press, there was stronger language. It said the following quote, Baruch Hashem, a Chashva Talmid Chacham was here from Eretz Yisrael, and he's talking about the Chil Shabbos inherent in water meters, and with this new water meter, which was designed to prevent Chil Shabbos, you're not being Michal Shabbos. And he quoted Hagai Shlomo Miller as a source for the fact that this is Chil Shabbos, and you need to put in this new water meter. Since I've been Zeicha over the years a bit, Mamish Sfase de Glima to be Mishamish a little bit of Shlomo Miller. This didn't strike me as a normative language that he would speak to say, oh, there's Chil Shabbos here, but now that you have this machine, there's not Chil Shabbos. Those of you who know him personally, I don't know if it's anybody from Toronto on the line, you can weigh in. Those of you who know him personally probably can know what I'm talking about. A very serious person, and he doesn't talk that way. So I pick up the phone, and I called, maybe I started Rabbi Kushner as his Adim. Or maybe I didn't even at the time. I just called him directly, and I asked Rosh Kollel, did Rosh Kollel say this? And so he laughs, and the laughing wasn't a funny laugh. The laugh was, as you know him, sometimes he laughs when he's upset, and he says, Leit Dubim V'Layar, never said this. Chas v'shalom. I'm going to say that this Chil Shabbos, and otherwise, unless you have this water meter, first of all, you know it's not my style. I don't give a share on individual appliances. Second of all, what about all the people who don't have water meters? So I said, what does Rav hold? I said, look, it's like any other appliance question on Shabbos, starting with the refrigerators. You have to sit down and down to Smekayvid Reish to come up with a heter, since most of Klal Yisrael is going to use electronic meters that are not retrofitted as they are in Eretz Yisrael. I wish I can go back to that page, because that page, you can figure out somehow to go back to the original page. No, you're going forward now, so I don't know. The original page had the notices, I don't like to call them Pashkavilim, had the notices in the Eretz Yisrael press, which have the psukim of Gedalei Hadairos. There it is, psukim of Gedalei Hadairos. Now you got to show the page with the. Okay, maybe the next page. Which had the psukim of Gedalei Yisrael. What happened? So in Eretz Yisrael, they had this problem, and when the water company started putting in water meters, everybody realized it was a shaila. Now, at the time of Vosner and Rav Nissen, they were all still alive, and they went to here we go. There's the article in the Jewish press, a third of Lakewood saved from Chil Shabbos. Water meter concerns, a third of Lakewood saved from Chil Shabbos, and that article discusses the allocation in Lakewood of the two different water meter companies. However, the other part of that thing should show up psak, I don't know why it's not working, but should show up psak from the Lakewood Paiskim, the actual Paiskim, if you can get that up, including headed by Reb Chaim, who was considered to be the senior Paisik, and then countersigned by Gedalei Yisrael. Okay, on the right side there, Lahasser Michshel, if you can make that somehow bigger, just if you can somehow enlarge that page dramatically. And the left side is the article in the press that I alluded to. It's only one of the two articles. It doesn't quote Shlomo Miller. That was in a similar article. I didn't want to print that because I now know that it wasn't accurate. But in this large Lahasser Michshel of Yisrael, you'll see a psak which says that you cannot use the regular G3 water meters. You can only use the water meters which have been retrofitted to avoid Chil Shabbos, and it's signed by, as you can see, Reb Chaim, and then it was also signed by Ran Leib, Zeichet Tzadik L'Vracha, Nissen Kaleret, Zeichet Tzadik L'Vracha, and Shmuel Erebach, Zeichet Tzadik L'Vracha, all of the senior Paiskim, and underneath they gave us some of the younger Paiskim. So all the senior Paiskim said that regular Madei Mayim is a shaila of an Isser Chamura on Shabbos. And they went to the water companies in Eretz Yisrael, and they convinced the water companies to, and here you can see the younger Paiskim, of Mishal Klein, who was Rav Vosner's Talmud Muvik, and Rav Israel Erbach, who is a younger Paisik, because he's only 92 now, Kanai Nahara, Ad Me'av Esrim, and two of the younger Paiskim, including somebody called Yitzchak Darzi. So Yitzchak Darzi is the Mechaber of the Shvus Yitzchak, and he is a Talmud by of Rabbi Yashiv, and he held that the water meters were usher. He took a trip, came to America, and he came to Lakewood, and he told everybody in Lakewood that the water meters are usher daraisa. This caused a big problem. Certain people heard him, and now I have to figure out what to do. So 2/3 of Lakewood is controlled by the old line water company, and they weren't interested in changing the water meters. It's not Eretz Yisrael, this is America. What do you do? So because of the phone call that I made to Shlomo as to what was quoted the paper. So a meeting was set up, and Rosh Shlomo said, "Look, I understand where they are coming from. They're coming from Bnei Brak, and these are Gedel Yisrael. I'm the Paisik in Lakewood. I'm telling you, we have to find a heter for this because not so pasha that it's usher." And the tshuva was produced, dated Tes Iyar Tafshin Ayin Gimel, which was written to the Shayel. The Shayel was Shlomo Gissinger, Zecher Tzaddik L'Vracha, which Shlomo said a water meter, electronic water meter, is mutter for 4 reasons. First of all, it's a psikresh lo nichalei. Why? Because the person who turns on the water would rather that it not be recorded at all. So it's a psikresha, maybe, but it's a psikresha lo nichalei because he doesn't want the water on. Says Rav Shlomo, but we don't pass like the arach without the snifla hatter, as we saw in Simish and Chaf. Says Rav Shlomo, okay, good. Now we have to find other snifim leheter. So the Mechaber Sin Shlim Chaf legabe schita has the heter called a barza arucha. A barza arucha means the long handle, like an end of a sponge, where you're not touching the shmata that's stuck into a barrel, which makes it issa schita directly. And therefore, this barza arucha takes it out of the gather of a vadai maisa biyadayim, and therefore, if you can mitzaref the heter of a barza arucha to a psikresh lo nichalei, it's only usher in a case where you have a kli underneath the barrel, the squeezing of the barrel, the shmata is stuck into the barrel. You need to pull the barrel out. Does the shmata have a stick stuck at the end of it, or you touching it directly where you're going to be vadai seichit? If you have a kli underneath it, then it's nichalei because you're collecting the yayin. So you don't have a heter of psikresh the lo nichalei. So therefore, why should it be mutter if it's nichalei? Says Rav Shlomo. The Gemara says the Rishonim say a psikresh lo nichalei is mutter, but the Paiskim say it's only mutter to sniff to other atera. A barza arucha is a sniff leheter, and now I'm going to give you more sniff leheter. What's another sniff leheter? So first of all, who says we pass like this aruch? So Rabbi Miller quotes a fascinating psak of Rav Simcha Zelig. This is the Haidah of the Beit Yisrael, as you can see, signed Reb Chaim, Reb Steinman, Reb Nissen, which ushered the water meters. Came along one of the younger Paiskim in Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Yitzchak Darzi, Baal Shvas Yitzchak, not so well known here in America. In Eretz Yisrael, it's a sefer which is more used by the Paiskim. I can give you examples of Svarim. I'm not talking about the Battle of Yergus Moshe 30 years ago, where Yergus Moshe had total halachic hegemony here in America, but didn't have that status in Eretz Yisrael. That's over with now. Started being over with, even right after Moshe's Petira. But there are Paiskim here now who are serious senior Paiskim for America, as is always in the Klal Yisrael. But they didn't necessarily have that Geshpanka yet in Eretz Yisrael, and the reverse is true too. So Shvitz Yitzchak came here, and he entered into a classical case of Ilo Advarim Shabin Eretz Yisrael bubble. A lot of what I'm telling you now is my opinion, but I saw this with my own eyes, which is why I'm giving this year. So I'll give you the information from the inside. The Shvitz Yitzchak showed up here and says, I have a letter here from Chaim and from Aaron Leib, which says water meters are usher. So now you guys got to change all your water meters. Problem is, this is America. And as if we didn't know in Tafshin Nine Gimel, we certainly know in Tafshin Pei, religious Jews do not control America. We like to delude ourselves into thinking that we do. And you can chat away as much as you want on this point after the shir. We want to do Yeshiva Zach, we can, but I think it's not a huge leap of logic now to say that we live in Gos. Can't just go to Con Edison or New Jersey Water and tell them, I don't like your water meter because it's some Chal Shabbos for me. They're not interested. So LMI, you'll say, good. But if it's a Chal Shabbos, pay out your pocket and change your water. You can't do that either. The water meter doesn't belong to you. It belongs to them. Try to change a Con Edison gas meter and put your own gas meter in. That's theft. Put you in jail. They put Jews in jail now all the time. So you can't do that. So we have a problem here. But what do you mean? Said the Eretz Yisrael Dika. Just get it changed. good. So they produced this article in the paper, says we're working on the change. So Avada, wherever you can change it, Matayv Manoim. But people, says Rav Shlomo Miller, who are serious people who for decades have been carrying the weight of Psak on their shoulders, understand that you can't do that. And therefore, if it's possible to change, Matayv Manoim. But if in places where it's not possible to change, what's the heter? So he said, some Chazalik paskind back in the 20s. Actually, it was written in the 30s. It was reprinted in the Apardis in America. They asked them about opening up refrigerators. Reb Simcha Zelig said, you're allowed to open up refrigerator because of the psik reish le'nichalei. You don't want the hot air in. Refrigerators, as I explained numerous times, is the avi of ice of all the technology questions. And we discussed it a bit. Really, we should have devoted a whole sheet of refrigerators, but can't do everything. And you all understand that this is Mechlekes Paiskim. You can open up the refrigerator when it's not going. When it's going, kamat, everybody holds his mutter. Not 100% kamat. When it's going, not even a shaila of a suffix, sale of any question. When it's open as a Mechlekes Paiskim, Chayisrael has divided into several camps. From Zalman held it was mutter because it's a Grumman of psik reish le'nichalei. Why is it psik reish le'nichalei? Because you don't want the hot air in. Say other Paiskim who says it's true you don't want the hot air in, but you want the compressor to go on to cool the food after the hot air comes in. So what? That's not what you're mechaber. So it's a psik reish le'nichalei in a grumma because you were talking about it's not clear that it's going to come on right away. All you're doing is opening up the door in the old style refrigerators before we get to the digital ones, which is a different shear. Before we get to the digital ones, which is a different shear connected to this shear of sending electronic impulse when you open up the new modern refrigerators. Everything I'm saying now, Rabbi Sai, are the old refrigerators. So the old refrigerators, the problem was the compressor. So when you open up the door, the hot air comes in. You're not interested in the hot air in the thing. It's progression nichalei. Maybe it's nichalei later. The compressor should go on to keep the food cold. That's not considered nichalei. And it's a grama because you didn't turn on directly. It comes on later. Maybe it will come on punked. The compressor will have reached the thermostat level of whatever the 8 is, 80. It turns on. I forgot. I used to know that number. It turns on the compressor. So what? Not a vadai. So it's a suffix. It's a suffix psik reisha. Can be mechav even the taz in a grama, in a isid rabbanon of psik reisha the le'nichalei. Said Shlomo Zalman, it is mutter. And not only that, Reb Simcha Zelig, the Dayan Brisk said it was mutter. Why? Typical Brisk Sfara. Because Reb Simcha Zelig was Saimach on the Aruch. What do you mean? Mechaber and Shem Chav says you can't be Saimach on the Aruch. Says Reb Zelig, Simcha Zelig, but the Rebbe Gezakta Meken, yeah. Why? Because Reb Chaim and the Shikol Torah, and Chedushim Chaim Levi al Rambam said that the Aruch holds, the Rambam holds like the Aruch. Bingo. Once the Ram holds at the Aruch not a das yachad in the Rishonim. Aruch's a pretty big person on his own, but the other Rishonim Taisus look at the Aruch very vociferously, as we learned. But according to Reb Chaim, the Rambam held like the Aruch, and therefore, if the Rambam held the Aruch, I don't have to worry about anything. And therefore, said Reb Simcha Zelig, you're allowed to open a refrigerator because Reb Chaim says you're allowed to. Maybe one of the few times in history, not the only few times in history, mamish an important psak, which is again every single house in Klai Yisrael was passing from Chedush Reb Chaim Levi el Rambam. You can look up the parts yourself. I was trying to find it. I forgot to find it on short notice, but it's a beautiful piece of shtickle Torah there. Says, okay, Shlomo Miller, in the tshuva that I'm having your Mar Mekaymis, frags this up. From the Gemara tomorrow's daf. If it was today's daf or yesterday's daf, I would spend time telling you about it. I don't have time to tell you about it. The bottom line, the Tamsis is from the Gemara in Shabbos, Kuf Lamed Aleph. The question is, Kuf Lamed Aleph. The Gemara there talks about Katzitzas of Beheres, is Darshan Mischaven, Ayetz of Psik reisha, and one of the kimtas of the Gemara is, B'd'ika Achar, the Achar should do it. Why? Because even if you're going to say, says the Aruch, of course, Achar should do it because the psik reish le'nichalei. He doesn't care about the Mila. So it's le'nichalei. So it's it's no problem. It teaches Beheres, and there's no problem with the psik reish on Shabbos. This is one of the major shitas Aruch. Says says Shlomo Miller, if that's the case, the Rambam, when he passed in the halacha, Tzitz should have made a chilik between acher and a father, and the Rambam doesn't. So in one shot, one fell swoop, Shlomo Miller machzavek the ganzer Reb Chaim that the Aruch is holds like Reb Chaim. I told Eilam in the Chanashir that I heard from Abramsky all these kashas that we ask now on the Aruch, all these kashas that we ask on the Aruch is on Reb Chaim from Afne Gemaras, and here's a Chalar Kasha on the Rambam from Afne Gemara. Reb Chaim's Avon in the Rambam holds like the Aruch from Afne Gemara. Says Reb Abramsky, I was there. I heard everybody asking kashas because in those days in Volozhin, the Bacharim in Volozhin were people like Rabbi Zalman, the Chulu, and Reb Abramsky, and we all asked him kashas from Afne Gemara, and he answered every single one. Good, but Reb Shlomo Miller asked the kasha on this Reb Chaim, as be it as it may. Yes, Masha yes, Lashna uses. Reb Chaim Simcha Zelig said that it is mutter to open a refrigerator because, yes, tomorrow's daf is 132. Kuflam base, right? If I said Kuflam Balf, I asked Mechila, as pointed out by my sister. Okay, so the says Reb Shlomo, but turning on the water and you have a electronic water meter, so what can be the Isser? So the Isser can be either according to the Chazon Ish, it is Bainu Amaka B'Patish, or according to the rest of the world, the Beis Yitzchak camp, it's Moilid. Bainu and Bainu Amaka B'Patish are packaged together because the Chazon Ish uses both. Says Reb Shlomo Miller that when it comes to the Isra of Moilid, I don't have a problem at all. Why? Because there's a Meferish Halacha in Siman Shin Chaf Aleph, where the Mishabura paskins that Moilid requires kavanah. The Isra Rabbanan of Moilid requires kavanah. There's no Isra of Einem Eschab in Moilid, even b'psikration. Negay to many halachais, important halachais that be negay to Moilid, making ice, all sorts of things like that, which I can't go into now, but for our purposes, it's enough to know that Moilid is mutter if it's Einem Eschab. This is a machlekes in the Paiskim. Not everybody agrees. This is Taz's chelik, and this is Taz introduces it, and he franks it up. So the Taz, at the end of the day, is not Shaymach this Kula, but many other Paiskim are. So first of all, I have an Einem Mechaben. So according to the Beis Yitzchak, that are being Moilid of electricity, macro, all cases, is only this in Rabbanan. So I have a Moilid. So therefore, Beinu Mechaben should be mutter. Answer number one. Now, the reason why the Taz is Asers is because the Psikration did Nichale. In that case of Moilid, you want to create whatever you're creating with the Moilid. The details, as I said, are too complicated. You can look in the Taz in Shin Chaf Aleph and in the Taz there by yourself. So what about the other prong of Makav Patish? So Shlomo Miller comes up with a beautiful svara. There's a Magid Mishnah in Hilchos Shabbos, Perigud Beis, Halacha Beis, which is talking about Mechaber. Says the Magid Mishnah, when it comes to the Isser of Mechaber, there the Gemara in Yuma says there's a Shaila of Mitzaref. Mechaber is a Machshin through Chulugufa. Mechaber Mateches is only an Isser Rabbanan because for the Raisi you need the real wood or Bishul. The Chibur of a Mateches is only it's an Asser, it's only Machshin through Chulugufa, except if you want to end up being Mitzaref to metal. If you're Mitzaref to metal, meaning what? You're using the metal smelting process as the last issue here to make it mitzaref. Says the Magid Mishnah. So you'll say this is Makav Patish. Says the Magid Mishnah, it's mutter. Why? Because there is no Isser of Makav Patish like Havana. And the Yisayt is understandable. In other malachas, even if you didn't do Kavana, but you did the malacha. The Yisayt of the malacha of Makav Patish requires Kavana to create a kli. And if you didn't have Kavana, you can't have Makav Patish. It's a shita of the Magid Mishnah. I'm not saying that this shita is ungenommen by everybody. The Magid Mishnah repeats it again, and based on the Gemara, which says about cutting wood for a splinter to use as a toothpick, you chayiv, lahariach, you pater, avol aser, because you're not mechaven to tikkun kli. Whereas when you're making a splinter, l'chari, you're making a kli, and l'chari it's a psikresha So there it's usher because Nikolai. But in Makam Patish, you're not chayev because there's no creation of Makam Patish in a case where you don't have kavanah. That's heter number 1A. Heter number 2 says Rav Shlomo Miller, it's grama. Not only is it grama, it's grama aydei kayach sheni. So yesterday, in the Achanashir, we went through a machlokes between Rashi and the Ramah and the Gemara and Sanhedrin of Ayin Zayin. The Gemara is talking about the Bit Kedemaya, and the Bit Kedemaya is the dam which holds the water. So it's Gemara Yechayev, you take away the Bit Kedemaya, and it's Kayach Rishon, it's Giri delay. So the Gemara Mahani Milim Kayach Rishon and Kayach Sheni Pater. The machlokes in Rashi and the Ramah, how you define Kayach Sheni, whether it means the water touching the dam is Kayach Rishon, the water behind the dam is Kayach Sheni, or whether it means the water flowing down after the first flow, after it opens up, coming from the top. This is a machlokes, 3 sheets is how to define Kayach Sheni. Rav Shlomo doesn't go into the details of Kayach Sheni, but it stands to reason that here, no matter how you're going to define the zerem, it's Kayach Sheni, because you turning on the faucet didn't do anything besides send the command to the disk without going into a whole other shear. I'm sorry to say this, but the reason why this is so complicated because there's 4 balls up in the air at the same time. We have a shaila, what's the isser of being reisham from the disk? So this is another machlokes between Eretz Yisrael Dika and the Americans. Eretz Yisrael Dika, Mishitz Chaznish hold that the rishim of the disk is kaisev, a shaila of malach of the rice of kaisev. Talmid Rav Shlomo Zalman held that this is not true because writing a disk is not ksiva. Yitzchak held when he came here to try to get the water exchange, he held this as shash of this rice of ksiva. Without going to ksiva at the moment, it's certainly kayach sheni because nothing that you did by opening up the water created any closing of the circuit anywhere. The closing of the circuit only comes after you reach 100 liters from the magnet, from the card to the home office. That's at best kayach sheni. So even though you could be chayiv, sometimes there is possibilities that grama doesn't help you, but in such a case, he says grama will help you, and he cites unusually so. This is the sweep of Gedal Yisrael. I was trying to figure out what the connection is. I came up with a possible connection. Shlomo Miller, I'm mentioning this because it's my zayder. Shlomo Miller was a Talmud of Shiv Chavetz Chaim in Baltimore. If anybody on this chat in Baltimore, you can say hello. And my Zeder Chaim Lezer Samson, my wife's grandfather, was Rashiv in Baltimore for over 50 years. And one of his star Talmidim, Sister Victor Miller, and Yibad L'chaim Tovim Yisrael Newman, Yibad L'chaim Tovim HaRabbanim Againer Baron Feldman, one of the star Talmidim, and one of his younger star Talmidim was Shlomo Miller, who was there in the 50s. So maybe Shlomo Miller got to know Dov Klonglass, who was the Meshgiach in Baltimore at the time. I don't know, this is speculation. I haven't researched it. Yeh quotes, unusually so, a shtickle Torah, a long shtickle Torah, Dov Klonglass, who in addition to being the Meshgiach and therefore a Baal Machshav and a Baal Musar, was also a big guy in learning. And he wrote a sefer called Darkei David, and he has a long shtickle Torah there on opening up faucets, hot water faucets on Shabbos. This was the equivalent of all the modern day showers that we have now with fancy technology. In the 50s, the issue was opening up waters because they started putting in the old style boiler technology. When you open up the faucet, the water came into the boiler from the central tank. And the question is whether that's mutter or usser. So Klal Yisrael in the ensuing 70 years has been noyeg lahachmer. Why? Because this is a very important issue. Because the question of what's grama or not is an ambiguous question. And therefore, something which is a maisa b'yadayim, wow, okay. I don't know what your last name is, Rav Heshi, but if you tell me, I'm sure my Schwieger, Zoli Gesundsein Dex, would remember you. My Schwieger's name was Mrs. Rabinot. She's the daughter of Rabbi Sampson. So, Rabbi Sampson's yard site, I guess it was 2 days ago, which is why I'm mentioning this. The Darkei David says that It's mutter to open up a hot water faucet on Shabbos. Mutter to open up, look at this, not one, but two Talmidim of TA. Mutter to open up a shreichem, mutter to open up a hot water on the Shabbos. Why? You all know the Klal Yisrael was machmer in this. Why? Because the area, the dividing line between grama and the Ma'aseh B'Yadayim is ambiguous. And Klal Yisrael felt at the end of the day, today, starting in the 60s and 70s and 80s, that opening up the hot water, which allowed immediately, without time lag, to have the water flow back into the tank where the hot water boiler, where the hot water coil is on, it's not a grama, it's a Ma'aseh B'Yadayim. Rav Kronglas held that it was mutter. Why? And he packaged together three aterim. He packaged together of a psikresh nichale, aide grama. He felt it was aide grama because he felt it was too much removed. And therefore, even in the case where you want to be machmer, that's only because nichale. Why is it nichale? Because you want to have hot water all the time. But in a case where it's like nichale, you have a classical tziruf of the aruch with the darshan mischaven takes away psikresh because the psikresh loy nichale, and he says the psikresh nichale and then grama is mutter. So in the case of the hot water, you can answer because maybe it's nichale, you want more hot water. That's a Matthias question. And Klal Yisrael decided to be machmer because we want hot water. In the case of the refrigerator, dicier. Yes, you want it to stay cold, and that's the Shvachis Taina. But you're not really worried about the cold, the stuff in the refrigerator defrosting because you opened the door. So therefore, the nichale is not a clear nichale. Says Rav Shlomo, if that's the case, I can remember if this heter of the Darkei David, which is a package of grama in a psikresh nichale, and therefore it should be mutter. The Chaznish holds that it's Issa D'Oraisa. So he says maybe the Chaznish will also be made in such a case. He doesn't say why, and I'm going to tell you why before the shir is over. So he says, Memela, we have a package of three aterim, a psikresh nichale, it's koyach sheni, and grama, bein mischaven, mutter. And then he takes a conservative approach against those people who want to be matter, and these people are not stam people. There's one senior paisik in America. I'm not going to go into names now because it's a allied but separate controversy. Once they matter electronic impulses when you don't see it. This is the battle over the Shabbos mode Yantiv ovens on Yantiv, whether you can turn up the electricity on Yantiv. And the side of the machlekes is whether if you turn on something, you push a button and something happens, but you don't see it, whether it's mutter or not. Shlomo felt very strongly that's usher. Most people felt it's usher. Agav, this machlekes was recorded in Yisharon, which was able to serve to some degree in America as the sefer of record for a lot of senior halachic controversies. So this machlekes between the Matirim and the Eishrim, and the Eishrim include most of the Rabbanim in America and Chutz La'aretz and Eretz Yisrael, hold that this just because you don't see it doesn't mean it is mutter. That kind of psak of Shlomo Miller. Rav Efrati, writing in a tshuva that was printed in Yisharon too, we put the package together, all the printers says, look, let's address the Zerem issue, the current issue. So what happens? So when you open up the water, there's a chashash that you're recording the thing in the disk, and there's a chashash that when it gets recorded in the disk, maybe you'll reach the 100 liter, and it's going to get sent there. And what have you done? You've created a impulse. The impulse is always there because that electronic line is always open. So what you're doing here is something called Hagba'at Zerem. You're increasing the frequency. Is Hagba'at Zerem Issa D'Oraisa according to the Chazon Ish or not? So Rav Efrati says, listen, this is a machlekes between the Shver and the Edom. Rav Yashav Zeichet Tzadik L'Racha held that Hagba'at Zerem is only Asa Midrabanan. Even if you're going to be Chayshel, she's Chazon Ish. Which Rav Yashav held you have to be Chayshish l'shitas Chazon Ish. In other words, Kedarkai b'psikas halacha, Rav Yashav was Chayshish l'chumra on those shitas. That was his derech and psika. So he was Chayshish l'shitas Chazon Ish. Maybe electricity is the Raisa, even though Mikra Din he held, like everybody, that it was the Rabbanan. But if you be Chayshish l'shitas Chazon Ish, he says the question is That's when you're sticking a sheka into a wall. You're sticking in a socket. That's Isser Deraisa according to Chaznish of Baino Maku Patish. That is Isser Rabban of Mailid. But what about according to the Chaznish Hagba Zerem, increasing an existing frequency, which you may do when you open up the electronic a water, which causes the water meter to increase the pulse to the home office. Says Rav Efrati B'Sher Rav Yashiv, Hagbad Zerem is only Asam Rabbanon. It's only a question of Mailid. Even he would venture, and this is what Rav Shlomo Zalman meant in his tshuva, he would venture that it's only Asar Midrabanan Mailid, and therefore you have no problem. What do I mean? Rav Shlomo Zalman mentions his tshuva. In Tafshin Nun Daled, before this entire controversy broke here in America, broke many years, B'Seif Yom Rav Shlomo Zalman, he was asked about water meters. And Rav Shlomo Zalman in a tshuva that was printed in Yeshurun. We was likely to be the first person to print this tshuva in the Sefer Zikaron that was printed 10 years, Tafshim Samachay, 10 years after Shlomo Zalman's P'tira. Shlomo Zalman was asked about water meters. In the time, there was still rudimentary, but it's clear he's talking about an electric water meter because he says so, even though there were subsequent attempts to claim that he didn't know what he was describing. I don't want to say Chas Shalom didn't know what he was talking about. That's us to say that phrase in the Gate from Zalman, but it would be, there are some who claim that he didn't understand the technology. Doesn't matter. Shlomo Zalman wrote a tshuva in which he says clearly, first of all, when it came to the Chiddush Zerem, I would say the Chaznish did not hold that this is an Issa D'Oraisa in such a case where you have an existing current going. He says it's because it's a tiny, pulse which stops right away. That's not a Zerem. It's slight different angle in the heter. But he says doesn't matter because this is Psikresha de Leinichale, and it's a grama. So it's a grama Psikresha Leinichale. Why is it Leinichale? Grama it is because it certainly doesn't happen directly, and you didn't do anything. And according to everybody, it's not Kaich Rishon. Why? Because you don't want the water usage to be recorded. The Lashon from Zalman is Kivin Shazel Kadesh Yichdesu Mayim Chadashim Rak Tzarech Shalamida. And he says, Tzarech Shalamida, I'm much happier to have it for free. So therefore, Shlomo Zalman held its mutter. Rafrati, writing in the shame of Rav Shlomo Zalman's Mechutin, Rav Yashiv, they share children, B'amtsois, Yibad L'chaim, a guy named Israel Auerbach, who was Rav Yashiv's Adam. So Rav Rafati says, look, water meters, I didn't hear a psak directly from Rav Yashiv, but I do know Rav Yashiv held like Zerem is the Rabbanon. So since it's only the Rabbanon, it can't be, he didn't stick the water meter to the wall now, it was already going. So that's the case. He quotes from the Zalman who says that it's like Nichale, quotes the tshuva that we printed in your shirt. And he says, it's a Sofik Psikresha according to the Taz. So even if you're not going to paskin l'chatchila, the Taz as Mishmur doesn't like to, nevertheless, it certainly can be packaged. So now I have the following package of potato. A, it's like Zerem, which is Isra Rabbanan only. So now once it's Isra Rabbanan, I can start packaging a tear. I have a Taz that says it's up to because who says when you turn it on the water, anything is going to happen, it's going to get sent there. It's a psikresha. Second of all, it's a psikresha like Nichale. Third of all, why it's a Nichale? Because from Zalman to Nichale, everybody agrees with this. Third of all, there's a klal that you heard from Rabbi earlier last week from Rabbi Kalas that's a machlekes paiskim whether psikresha in the derabanan is mutter or not. Even according to the Aruch that I hold, it's Asr B'Rabbanan, but we find that it's Rabbanan when the Isra, underlying Isra is Isra Rabbanan, it's a machlekes in the paiskim Trum Sedesh and the Magen Avraham. Trum Sedesh holds that a psikresha Isra Rabbanan is mutter, Magen Avraham is chaylik. Many paiskim, not all, but many paiskim, it's hard to go up against the Magen Avraham. Many paiskim will hold that a psikresha in a derabanan is mutter. I now have three possible ateiru. Psikresha nichale, 4. Grama. Third is, which from Zalman says it's a psikresha nichale big grama. It's possibly a psikresha sha'avar according to the Taz. We have the paiskim will hold from Sadesha that a psikresha in derabanan is mutter. And in addition to that, we have koyach sheni, because it's koyach koychai. Similar to the Gemara in Sanhedrin the Fine Zion on the Bidka, the Maya. He says, I'm not clear how what Rabbi Yasha Shita and Koiche was, and this is the machlekes that I mentioned earlier between Rashi and Ramah, how to define Koiche. Al Kapanim Yikum Mitzar. But he says, however, after he was Mishamish Rabbi Yashav, he became close to Reb Chaim. I said, I heard from Reb Chaim that according to Chazon Ish, it's an Isser Shashav Nisser Deraisa. So now you understand the Pashkavil Rabbi Say, and you understand what the problem here is, Benigea to America. In Eretz Yisrael, Rav Minyan Bidin of the Gedalia Paiskim, Reb Chaim, Yibad L'Chaim, even though Rabbi Leib, Zecher Tzad of Kosh Vracha, did not usually get involved in Psak, but he certainly signed when it was necessary. Rabbi Nissen Karelitz, Zecher Tzad of Vracha, they all were in the Askula, in the school, where Yocheshes Lashit Chazon Ish. So it's usher. A, B, on the practical level, in Eretz Yisrael, if you can go to Chadera and get the entire power generation system, as I mentioned earlier in the Chanish here, rejiggered to lower the Yisurim on Shabbos, and they've done that with great, great strides. Some of my friends contributed serious money to this project, setting up cutouts, they grumma in the electric grid for the entire country. You certainly can go to the water company and ask them to please put in kosher water meters. That's Eretz Yisrael. We, unfortunately, live in Gullus. If there's somebody here from Eretz Yisrael, I would be thrilled, but we unfortunately live in Gullus. Hold on a second. I just want to tell my Rebbetzin that there are two Talmidim here, Rabbi Sampson. Bobby! Okay, because when I finish the shir, the chat goes off and I won't remember what was written here. Back to this. So in America, we don't have the ability easily to change the water meters because we don't control the actions. You need to find a heter. And that's exactly what Rav Shlomo did. Rav Darzi, we printed this in Yishern, was not happy with this. And he writes a Shlomo letter. And he starts ding with Shlomo on several fronts. I'm going to give you what he said, and I'll tell you how Rav Shlomo answered. He tells Rav Shlomo, listen, who says this is the Tzikra Shlei Nichalei? He says, and he brings the, I love this raya, it's the cab driver raya. The Metzias is true, but you can speculate whether the raya is a raya. What's the Metzias? So when you get into a cab in Eretz Yisrael, at least until recently, I don't know about now, the guy asked you, Moneh b'li moneh. What's the site? So everybody knows. You're taking a gamble. Sometimes moneh is cheaper, sometimes not. If the guy's asking you, it's usually because he knows what's more expensive and he can charge you more money. What's the site here? The site here is they're always looking for a way to minimize your money. It says Rabbi Darcy, this is not a situation of Nichalei, because it's very important for somebody to know how much the water is, because in such a case, more of his neighbors are going to have to pay for his water. He says this is the derech hamukubeles with the rishum, and therefore you want to know how much water it is, because if not, you may be overpaying. You don't want to be geisel from your shchenim. That ended up that the bais mishutaf gets will get a water bill for the whole thing. So lemaisa, it's nichalei to have the rishum, because maybe this way, if there was no rishum, you'd be overpaying, and that's not considered to be lichal. He brings it right from Rav Shlomo Zalman in Chelik Aleph Siman Tzadik Aleph. Rav Shlomo Zalman says that just not having, I'm not sure, just not having I'm talking to Eli, I'm not sure, just not having a nichusa to be Mekal Shabbos is not considered le'nichalei. You need to have le'nichalei on the actual pu'ula. Similarly here too, he says, just having a nechusa not to be nichalei is not considered to be a psikresha le'nichalei. This is basically his taina. This is the basic site of his taina. It's written up in the long arichas and Yeshurun Chavtes. If you want, you can go to Chacham and see it. You can probably get back copies at Rabbi Levitz. I'm not advertising here because we're sold out. But I'd like people to look at the tshuvas inside. I printed them on the Mar Mekaymis, and Dr. Lederach will be happy to send to anybody who wishes to see the full set through an email on the chat. So this is raya. Raya number one is that it is nichale. Second, his main taina is that it's not a grama. Why is it not a grama? Because Shlomo Zalman does agree that sometimes things are too karev to an action to be considered to be a grama, and this is too close to the action because he holds that right when you turn on the water, it's getting recorded on a disk, and now we have a whole new problem. Whether recording on a disk is a Maisa b'yadayim, you want to say it's a strong svar if he doesn't use a lot of water, it helps him to have a water meter. I agree, that's a svara. Shlomo Miller did not agree this is a svara in the least bit. So in Yeshurun Lamed Aleph, we printed the second go around here, and this was written in ER. Rabbi Darzi very sharply wrote a letter. I'll tell you off the record, when this issue started, he didn't chop exactly what Shlomo Miller's standing as one of the 2-3 senior poskim in North America was. Otherwise, he would perhaps have written differently or acted differently. And he writes a sharply worded letter to, not a personal letter, but a sharply halachic letter to Shlomo Zalman. It depends, and it's mostly cited on the svara to Shlomo Miller that Eli is digging sich with. What's your last name, Eli? Eli is digging sich with that he agrees with Rabbi Darzi that's nichale because he doesn't want to overpay. Okay, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman disagrees with you because Rabbi Shlomo Zalman said he'd rather not pay. Shlomo Miller disagrees with you. Shlomo Miller just wipes out Rabbi Darzi's the raya. Shlomo Miller goes through the whole drill over again. First, he starts saying, "Listen, I'm not passing for Eretz Yisrael. If you can get the water meters changed, not toiv manoim." There are a couple of people on the line here from Baltimore. Yaina Atensasser, Rabbi Yaina Atensasser, you may know, was mumcha in electronics for the Star K for Rabbi Heinman. I brought him up north of the Mason-Dixon line a couple of years ago, and he said a shear on electronic equipment. And I talked about the water meters, and he said in Baltimore, in fact, they were able to kill it. Is very chashuv and to kill it. They were able to do a deal, and if you're from Baltimore and I'm wrong, you can correct me. They were able to do a deal with the water company, and they were able to put in the kosher water meters. This is not true in New York. Not true, and it would have been true 10 years ago. Not true now. Lakewood, as I said, is an open question. Some places yes, maybe some places not. So you need to have a header. So Shlomo says, I'm passing for Lakewood. That's my job. Eretz Yisrael is not my job. If Baron Leib was alive at the time, said you should change your water meter, change your water meter. If you can, of course. No one is ever going to accuse Shlomo Miller of being a mekel on Hilchos Shabbos in any form whatsoever. However, halachically, he says, I'm bringing you 5 rayas that the halacha is like the aruch. Even if I hold halacha like the aruch, it's only asam rabbanan. And then the question is, you're telling me it's noyach le barishon? Says the Shlomo Miller, if the madad, you can see it in the Gemara Mekayos yourself. It's the second letter of Reb Shlomo. Said if the madad le yifal, he's a muchzik on the money, and he would not have to pay anything. They're going to make an estimate how much he's going to pay, and Rabbi Darzi argued that estimate may go against you. That's why you want the water meter. And my chaverim here, Abeli, says maybe that's a reason. That's a reason to say that's nichale. Shlomo does not agree, and therefore he says it's not a v'yais mizef. It's not going to work on Shabbos and other days. It will work. He'd rather not work on Shabbos at all, and he'll be muzik at 1/7 of the money. So that's, and he's a mitzvah chaver l'rayas. He's not a gazlan. And maybe this is, again, an issue between Eretz Yisrael and America. Here, it's really not a problem with of not paying your water bill if they don't record it. It's certainly, of course, guy can't go into the din malchusa questions of difference in Eretz Yisrael and America, but it did lend a little bit to this mikuach hilchasi here. And says Shlomo Miller, I'm not zaz. That's his lashon. I'm zaz, not zaz from Kaimina, no matter how many arguments he wants to make. This is the psikresha to Leinichale, and this is what he says. And maybe Dr. Lederreich, it's in, I think, in 3 that I sent you. So if you can cook it up here, just to show to the before we close. He says, V'chol alfei Yehudim, thousands of people in New York. Let me see this. No, this is not it. Keep on going. Keep on going. This is Rabbi Darzi's letter to Rabbi Miller, so it should be the next one, the response. Keep on going. There we go. So here's the Tshuva now, written in Hey El Tafshan Gimel. I was responsible, be very frank with you, in eliciting this Tshuva because the Rav was not so anxious to enter into yet another round with the Shvus Yitzchak, but he did it because he felt it was necessary to clarify the halacha as is practiced here in America. And if you can see there, if you want to take it down to the fourth paragraph, which begins B'chol Masha Kasafti, Eineni Zazmim Kaimi. I'm not budging that it's a psikresh l'nichalei. Stop. So even though the svaras that many, including Rabeli, I'll tell you this is more than average, less than the average. I'm not sure that's the site. Including Eli felt that this is maybe nichalei. Shlomo felt this is not nichalei. As you can see the last line there, he says you're a mukzik on the money, so there's no question. And besides, this is how senior pais can think. I have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, many 100,000 people are using water meters every Shabbos. And the same story with the sump pumps, Rabbi Say. Everybody in this chat who has a single family house uses some sort of a electronic sewage pump. How you allowed to go to how you allowed to go to the bathroom on Shabbos? When you get the water down, you're activating a pump somewhere. So you have to come onto a package of a terror. That it's traditional and nichalei, and it's a grama. It's a psikresha, it's a suffix psikresha. This is how we live. She says, chas v'shalom, that all the thousands of people, look at that paragraph, Machal Shabbos. Without matzah psikresha nichalei, without a tzirf of a heter, and he goes through the term again, that with the barza, which means it's not a vada schita, it's barza rucha, it's mutter, it's tartel tavusa, and he says, you're going to say it's not a psikresha because it's a pu'ula that's done immediately, says Shlomo, I don't know what you're talking about. And basically, he answers and counters every argument that's made in the 2-page letter by Rav Darzi to Aser. Darzi argued with everything, argued with the Makah Patish. It's a very instructive tshuva. What was that again? What was the shaila? The question was, why does Sfek Sveika not enter any of the lumdus? Sfek Sveika is a klal in Yardeya, in Hilchos Isser v'Heter. We don't usually use Sfek Sveika in Shabbos. We use packages of Heterim in Shabbos, as I've been trying to show you on the electronic thing. Sometimes you can those are Sfek Sveika, but Sfek Sveika, as I said, is a Yardeya Isser v'Heter principle, not used in so much in Shabbos. So, Lamaisa, we now have a package, as it explains. He quotes again the Divrei David of David Kronglass Legabe, the water, where he says that it's a grama and an Isser Rabbanan and a Tzekresh D'Lai on opening the water. That's what we have here too. And he goes through other machlekes. And he says, look at the last paragraph. Kvar kasafti, shein any case of klal in Eretz Yisrael. I'm not talking about Eretz Yisrael. The mesh machlekes ben rabbanim sham bari nachal ataken davar sheitzi de kulam. Mashkin come by America, yeshlam ataken akach, and that's where. Look at this. What is this? Are we getting Zoom bombed? I hope not. Okay. If we are, we're going to have to finish. So, Rabbi Sai, let me chazer over here. What's happening? There's a lot more here. You can see a lot of the Marmakaimis. The reason why I chose this to instruct it, because I watched this. I was actually to be in the middle here of producing the written record. I was there when this vikuach went on. I was in Israel for one of our Yachikalas. You were there, many of you were there. And I had a meeting with the guy in Shvus Yitzchak in the lobby of the Ramada Hotel. And we discussed this. And it was clear to me that he was going and learning, but he lacked basic knowledge of America. And this is really and without in any way, chas v'shalom, in any way being mafkes, the extremes zehiris that we need in digduk b'halacha in Shabbos, but we live in the real world. And just as we need to find a heter for the security cameras at the Kaisel, you got to reconcile the fact that there are terrorists who wish to put bombs in public places with our need to go to the Kaisel on Shabbos. And therefore, you got to go through a metal detector. And you need to leave your house in Shabbos. So in places such as in LA, there are streets in Jewish neighborhoods where you step on the street and the light changes. So what are you supposed to do? Fly? Stay at home? Maybe, but that's not the real world. So therefore, we have to be done. And just as Rabbi Yashiv says, if they're going to take a picture from you from a satellite, you can't. Doesn't stop you from walking out to the street. That's an easy call. But what about going through the security camera at the Kaisel? It's a much harder call. Rabbi Yashiv was not happy with that, and they had to, as you know, jump through halachic hoops to get a heter there. They had to. That's a sheer maybe. Rabbi Smith will talk about that next week. They had to get a system where it was erasable, so to make it a ksiva shedim scamas, to bring it down to a possible nisud rabbanon, because to be chayshes and shittas that recording something on magnetic videotape is this the rise of ksiva, all the complications that are inherent in that kind of thing. So we live in the real world. The water meters is not the most sophisticated piece of technology. Right now, I'm sure the water meters that I showed you have been surpassed with more fancy water meters that maybe they order lunch for you. I don't know. Or they order an Uber for you if you need a ride, whatever. The problems are getting more chomer, and the place can have to constantly jump, of course, to the appliances, the refrigerators are the most complicated at all, because here, every time you open a refrigerator, you are, according to some shittas, having a problem, and that's why people such as Rabbi Ortner have been working to fix that, but they're working in the American system. You can go to the manufacturers, and a huge amount of time and effort has been invested in this in Ashreihem, and that's why my friend in Town and Country Appliance Lakewood jokingly calls himself the biggest Pesach in appliance sales in the world, because everybody asks him what the Pesach instead of which refrigerators are mutter. You got to know about this stuff. Yes, lismach, as we saw with the water meters on many heterim, when you have to. If you don't have to, you don't have to. But in this case, you see how the battle played out. Where you can change the water meters in Eretz Yisrael, you get the Chaim, you bundle the Chaim, the Pesachim Zatzal to say change the water meters. Well, you can't, even in Lakewood. Maybe you can live on one side of, I think the dividing line is, the closer you get to the parkway, the easier it is to get the other water meter company, and then you can get them to put in this water meter. This is the research I did 5 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe dated by now. Closer you get to Lakewood proper, I guess, west, the older water meter company controls there. It's not so easy to change the water meters. As I said, in certain places they were designed to be able to do this. Rabbi Sai, Adkan, a little bit of an overview. We have today just a chazer in the issues here of the water meter Shabbos. We discussed questions of what's a grum and what's a not. We discussed questions of what's a psikresh nichale, what's nichale or not. Some of it depends on the mitzias. We had a little bit cool here in the chat. Third, we discussed, hold on one second. We discussed questions of psikresh nichale on what's a nichale. We discussed, I'm just showing my reference to the people who remember Rabbi Sampson and lived in Baltimore. We discussed what's a machlekes of nichale or not, and we discussed also two other issues, koyach rishon and koyach sheni, and we discussed tzikresha and the Rabbanan.